Well, I thought I'd talk to you today about a field that is dear to my heart and something that I came into having to understand intimately over the last couple of years. Because a year and a half ago, my colleagues, my dean, president of the university told me, well, Alex, founder of the Masters of Communications Management program at McMaster has run his term, and he wants to get back to research and thinking about things, thinking deep thoughts and looking into the field. And we'd like you to take over as director of the program. So I thought, okay, I can do this. I'm a practitioner myself. I know the field. I've been involved. I've been an academic. I run a lab. All of these things are things that should qualify me to run a program. But one of the things that I found that I hadn't thought about in any great detail is what exactly does it mean to be a practitioner? And one of the things I'd thought about a lot over the last 10 to 15 years of my own life in communications as a consultant, as an academic, was really focused on small problems. How do I maximize coverage or placement for a client or for a, if I'm studying it for a political party, something like that, on in a regional locality or in a newspaper ecology or in a media ecology. And when you get focused so much on the tasks that are at hand, you sometimes stop thinking about the bigger picture. So I did take some time and think about and started to think about where the profession is going, what it's doing. Well, one of the first things that I thought about is there's a huge culture shift that's happening right now. We're just not the nation we used to be. We're not the world we used to be. There's been a shift away from print culture, which you might call broadcast culture, which is based on a lot of reading and highly produced, really structured messaging produced by experts and kept behind a gate by experts. So move away from that one-to-many model, which is really quite elitist actually, to a many-to-many model. And what is that new model? It's an oral culture, right? So we've shifted away from a literate culture towards an oral culture. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're thinking to yourself, that's a bad thing. It's regression. It's a step backwards, right? So is it though? Well, not really. And I used to have those thoughts. I used to think to myself, my students don't read anymore. What does that mean? Is this a terrible new reality that we're dealing with? Is this an illiterate population? And as I thought about that, I started asking myself the question, what does it actually mean to be literate? What does it mean to be focused on gaining knowledge and then transmitting that knowledge to other people? And I realized that there are actually many different ways of learning and many different ways of taking a message in and understanding it and then sharing it with others than just the traditional ones that we're usually sort of beaten into understanding and thinking about in school and in the university system, in the college system. So I thought to myself, okay, what is this new way of communicating? And really it's a storytelling means of communicating. We're moving from structured, controlled, shaped messages where folks in the public relations industry or in advertising, even in marketing, have control over the message, have a command and control over distribution channels, to a world where really it's a grassroots inverted pyramid, right? Where the many sort of passionate employees of an organization or the many passionate citizens of a town or citizens of an organization, or as our regional neighbor here, Hamilton, found out of a virtual ward in a recent interesting interaction between the city and its Twitter followers. Really, we found that we've moved away from this idea that print only is what matters to a world in which all sorts of different ways of communicating matter. Okay. So I thought to myself, okay, let me take a step back from this. And again, I know I'm talking about PR today, but first let's talk about students, because students are the future, and students are often the people that are the harbingers of what's going to happen in the culture. Okay? So I started to say, okay, let's move away from the idea of PowerPoint, move away from the idea of focused readings and move to discussion, move to oral communication. So we actually shut all the technology down in our classroom and found that actually we were all great storytellers. And the class, one of my senior seminars that I run on news analysis, ran better than ever. So I thought to myself, what's happened? The insight was there, the depth was there, the focus was there. So I thought to myself, is this a phenomenon that's only happening in my classroom? So the next time that I was involved as a consultant with a campaign, I started proposing the same thing. Rather than communicating with the public via the traditional media, trying to get a crafted message out and shooting it out over television or radio, structured message, or in print, let's try to engage the public. Let's try to engage the public using digital media, or using social media. And so we did. And it was interesting to hear the use of GPS in farming because we did much the same thing. We used GPS to situate creative challenges and successes and celebrate residents who had done amazing things in a particular locality, in a particular town. And the level of engagement with the map was amazing. And the way that that map became a thread or a canvas on which people painted their own stories by dropping their own pins and linking it to their own YouTube videos or personal narratives on Twitter or using Storify or whatever, all of a sudden I started to realize that a very broad swath of the population had become incredibly sophisticated communicators and incredibly engaged communicators. And this is something that honestly, the industry hadn't thought of very much because the industry had gotten kind of lazy. Because it's easy to craft a message, make relationships with reporters or with large media channels, and then communicate in a really targeted fashion via those trusted, predictable ways of getting to your target publics. Okay? And even listen to the language. It's very much about targeting, about focusing. It's about commodifying your publics rather than building relationships with them. And so what the new age of public relations, I think, is really this idea of back to the future. The foundations of the profession were in relationship management, in reputation management, in building trust. And these are things that you can only do really on a one-to-one basis. Okay? So how do you do that when you were using mass media? Well, you didn't have to. It was too convenient. Advertising was successful. You tried out a subject matter expert, and they would produce a report or speak in the newspaper, and people would be quiet, accept that idea, and if they gave feedback, it might be a very slender portion of the population that would send a letter to the editor or something like that. Okay? But everything's different with social media because the old model was really elitist, if you think about it. The old print-based model that favored reading, that favored an understanding of how texts work, favored grammar, favored style, normative style, excluded a big part of the population and left them disenfranchised. But then with the advent of digital communication, with mobile communication, you have a convenient, open portal inviting people to participate at the level they can participate in the way they want to participate, and at the time they want to participate. And that is an incredible shift in the culture. It's a shift away from top-down normative thinking to many-to-many grassroots thinking. It's a shift from a broadcast model of communicating, of an organization with its publics, a government with its shareholders, a government with its citizens, a corporation with its shareholders, whatever, right? To the idea of building a community, measuring interpersonal relationships, measuring people's social capital. So how do you, as a practitioner, prepare for this old, new way of doing public relations? Well, one of the ways you do that, actually, is by becoming a generalist in many ways. Learning about the converging fields, journalism, advertising, public relations, marketing, coming together under a generalized communications function. thinking about what is the dynamic, what is the currency of relationships, okay? The currency of relationships is trust, but the other currency of relationships is belief. And the third currency of relationships is social capital. How do people interact around your brand, around what's your message? How do they feel about themselves and their relationships with other people because of the venues you've created for them to communicate in, the relationships you've built with them? Okay? So we move into an interpersonal communication world. So you're thinking, okay, but that's fuzzy, it's muddy. Actually, quite the opposite. It's much more measurable than the reach of any broadcast communication strategy ever was. The analytics available on affect, on tonality, on the ability of people to understand what you've said and how they relate to one another around your message are greater than ever. And what's neat about that particular literacy, that visual literacy, is it's one that most people share. Most people can understand a graphic. Most people appreciate a graphic. So, what does a modern-day PR pro have to know? Well, they have to have business smarts. They have to get the business that they're representing, whether it's government, private, or not-for-profit. They have to get the tools. So they have to be a fan or at least an enthusiast of technologies. They have to understand the basics of statistics and mathematics, right? Because they have to get how to visualize elements. Because the new language of data, with open data, with free data, with open source data, is going to be visualization. And it's a huge opening market to for budding young entrepreneurs. And that is actually translating knowledge that's locked in PDF files in databases and opening it to the public, to many publics, to a broad section of the public through effective, intelligent visualization. But that requires some math smarts. It requires some tools smarts. It requires business smarts, right? And then the third key element of all this, is actually the idea of journalism. You have to understand how to create your own content because news media is changing. The idea of earned media, that is to say media that's available in the public, is fading, it's diminishing. Because as people are generating their own media, their own messaging, as organizations are building relationships with their publics, whether it's, like I said, government or not-for-profit or whatever, as that relationship becomes manifest in tweets, in YouTube videos, in blogs, in conversations via wikis, whatever, as all of that happens, more and more, the focus is going to be on effectively managing those relationships, effectively managing those communities, and getting people together. So in this new oral culture, in this new world of thinking about communications, it's more important than ever to be literate. It's more important than ever to be a generalist. And it's more important than ever to understand about technology. And finally, it's more important than ever to have basic math and stats skills. Why? Because each of these things are the new languages of producing a message that's going to resonate with a broad public. Why? Because each of those things are the parts of what it takes to effectively use technology and generate content internally. Okay? If you don't have the four elements, you can't generate content and then know where it's gone or how people have responded to it. So you have to know how to write. You have to know how to produce technology, use technology to produce content from many places, from an oral perspective, from a written perspective, from a video perspective. And so you also have to bring it all together in a place or in a sense that makes that technology available to people and makes them feel included. How do you make people feel included? You don't make them feel included by alienating them. You don't make them feel included by preaching to them. You make people feel included by acting in their interest, by acknowledging them, by endorsing them. So really, having a sense of the public interest, tying all those skills and those abilities to represent the perspective of the organization you represent together with a keen sense of local culture, of local identity, of what makes people dream, what makes them afraid in a particular locality. So having that almost anthropological understanding of a place that you're working in as a practitioner is the final key. Because if you can generate content now that transcends text and engages people acoustically, orally, every way, and if you can reach them with good content and interesting visualizations, and if you get the business model, you get their business model, then you can communicate messages that are relevant, that serve the public interest, and finally, that actually engage publics and turn what were otherwise recipients of your message into a community that's gathered around your brand or gathered around the cause that you want to represent. So public relations has definitely changed. It's changed from a managerial function which sent messages out to a sort of to a profession that's in many ways the sister profession to law. Lawyers operate in the court of law. Public relations professionals operate in the arena of public opinion. It's not a court because there's no magistrate, right? I mean, nobody will ever say whether you're right or wrong. But they operate in the arena of public opinion. So, and that arena of public opinion used to be an elitist one. But now it's been open to everybody via social media, via mobile communications. So it's an exciting time to be in public relations. It's an exciting time to be a communications manager. Because all of a sudden, you represent the whole organization. You represent the brand holistically. You are the person who channels influence between your organization and the public. What an exciting place to be. And how more exciting to be there at a time when you can put that to economic advantage and when you can measure it. Because when you understand what the community that you're approaching or talking to really worries about, then what makes them dream, what makes them fear, then you can know them. And if you can know them, you can speak with them and build a relationship with them that's based on trust and mutual understanding and mutuality. Two-way communication, relational communication. So in a nutshell, public relations is a profession that's about to take a leadership position in our culture, because public relations is a culture shaper. Communications managers are culture makers, culture shapers. They're influence makers. So the trick is, I think, to be an informed, enlightened, and participant engaged culture maker who opens themselves to the public, builds relationships, and invites people in, rather than asking them to just receive a message as a gift from you. Because it's inviting people in that makes you effective. And it's the only way to be effective in the future, really, as a communications professional.